Hello, I'm Holly Tanner with the Herman and Wallace Pelvic Rehab Institute. I'm here with Kate Bailey, and she is going to tell us about the course that she has designed for the Institute.
Hi, my name's Kate Bailey. So I am a pelvic floor physical therapist, and I've been a pelvic floor PT going on 4 or 5 years now. But before that, I have been a Pilates instructor for now 20 years, which is a little bit hard to imagine. And I've been teaching yoga for over a decade. And so this course is really a culmination of all of my experiences, both with the yoga population, the Pilates population, and then the pelvic floor population, kiddos all the way up through adulthood, and how we can use some of the techniques from the yoga philosophies to really support people in their healing process from pelvic pain, but also just in kind of getting in their own bodies.
Mhm. And you've designed the course to be a bit modular. What can participants expect to learn when they come to the course?
Yeah, so the great thing about this course, I wrote this course when the pandemic started, and my whole intention was to make the didactic information a self-paced kind of go at your own speed, watch the videos as much as you want kind of course, so that when there's dedicated time together, there's a lot more about discussion and me guiding through people through the labs that they could then guide their other fellow colleagues or their patients to the labs. And so it really is designed so that where I'm not spending a lot of time lecturing at a screen during the time that we're dedicating to being with each other, and that it's really more about a conversation, which is great because I feel like that allows people to learn about the information in their own times, marinate in it a little bit, and then come with questions.
And of course, there are a lot of ways that yoga can be approached. And you have chosen the restorative yoga. And can you share a little bit about your philosophy about where you feel like this fits in with the care we provide to a lot of our patients with pelvic health conditions?
Sure. Yeah, the beginning part of the course is a really lovely, hopefully relatively brief overview of like what yoga is, because I feel like if we're going to take a segment out of the yoga method, we should also understand like what the whole orange is, so to speak. The restorative yoga component to me is really special because it's one of the only times that we prioritize rest and not doing and sitting with ourselves, and not necessarily like trying to get stronger or trying to get more flexible, but it's really about allowing our bodies to be. And sometimes that is being in a little bit of discomfort, sometimes that is just being with the exhaustion that we, I think, all have a little bit of, but learning how to be with ourselves for 8 to 10 to 15 minutes, and see that as a really productive part of our treatment plan. And so it's a
You
little
know,
bit different than, like active movement.
mhm. And Kate, one of the things I've really appreciated learning from you is how, when people are being instructed in concepts like meditation, perhaps yoga principles, relaxation strategies, sometimes even the cue to close your eyes or tune into what a person is feeling in their body can potentially be re-traumatizing or scary or very difficult. And can you speak to that a little bit about how that informs your course?
Sure. Well, I think one of the things that we highlight in the course is how much of trauma actually occurs in and around the home, right? And so when we're asking patients to do a home program, one of the discussion points that we'll have in the course is, well, what if the home is inherently triggering or inherently unsafe? And how can we use concepts of graded exposure to get someone from needing maybe a lot of sensory things like lights on, windows locked, facing the window, eyes open, toward like very slowly getting people toward a little bit more safety? Or if that's not a possibility, finding another location and like strategizing how we can prioritize our own safety and our own ability to relax, rather than saying, I must relax, I'm not relaxing enough, right? And I think the other components of the trauma in the course is kind of the unveiling of just how prevalent trauma is. And in pelvic health, I think we talk a lot about sexual trauma because obviously we're dealing a lot with the pelvic floor region and the genitals and the coming in of different genitals into genitals and the removing, and all of those things. But one of the things that I think we sometimes might be able to speak to more of is kind of like the little subversive types of trauma, whether it's
Mm.
emotional trauma, whether it's neglect, whether it's transgenerational trauma or intersectionality trauma from a point of racism or trauma from the LGBTQ community. And then there's this other component in yoga that is coming out now that is about the trauma that has been handed down through the yoga lineages. And so
Mm.
sometimes people just assume like, oh, you've been in the yoga community, this will be really easy for you. And what I think is not well understood, but we're understanding it even better now, is that a lot of people who have practiced yoga in a deep way have significant trauma from yoga. And
Mm.
so then the question is, how do we reclaim a practice that is so lovely when done with care and kindness and non-harming for people who maybe have experienced it in a very harmful way, and introduce it as a non-harming, caring, compassionate method for people who haven't experienced it. And so the whole idea is, how do you be in rest in your body in empowerment?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And, for those folks, certainly some of the people who come to your class might be yoga therapists or yoga instructors, and other folks might be very new to the work. Where do you see the yoga practice that you are teaching fitting into the scopes of practice of pelvic health clinicians, OTs, PTs, or other folks? And what kind of feedback are you getting about where this lands?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I think as PTs and OTs, we're starting to bring mindfulness in a lot to our programming in terms of some of the work from John Kabat-Zinn on how great meditation is for so many different things. And I think there is still a little bit of a like, how do I put this in my plan of care question? And the great thing about this class is we can talk directly to that of say, what if you are in a hospital-based scenario? You can give restorative yoga to someone in a hospital bed very easily. They're not going anywhere. And so what a great thing to give them a breathing practice, a concentration practice, and a rest practice. For someone in private practice, let's say in orthopedics, this is the type of practice where maybe you're not giving pelvic floor strengthening if someone has a large degree of overactivity in their pelvic floor, but they still need something to do at home or they need something to do at the office. And so if restorative yoga is maybe a little bit too far, maybe they don't have a space that they can lie down on the floor. That's when we can say, okay, well, how do we then transfer a pelvic floor restorative yoga posture to a desk situation? Can you cross your legs on your chair and lean forward and kind of modify it that way? And then there's this component of the class that's all about breathing. And I think we know in pelvic health how wonderful and how great breath work can be. And so some of these techniques can be used. I kind of call them like secret exercises. Like you can do them in the grocery store, you can do them on the plane, or you can do them at home when your kids are screaming or when you're, on a walk with your dog, and kind of incorporate concepts of yoga and restoration into everyday life in addition to having a dedicated practice. Let's
Mhm.
talk about all of that in terms of like, maybe you don't have someone lay down on your plinth for 8 minutes. You might, though, if they are someone who's dealing with a lot of trauma, to like sit with them and be a little bit of that safety, kind of understand what their nervous system does. So
Mhm.
that may be part of your therapeutic activity. But you also may say, like, we're going to set you up. How are we going to do this at your house? Like, what kind of pillows and cushions do you have? What kind of blankets? And then let's like figure out how to strategize for home.
And that's probably what so much of the fun of this course comes from, right? Is you can take all these layers of the nerdiness of the neurosciences and this historical practice and people's own experiences and, all these different lenses. And there really is a lot of allowance. And at its core, there's also a lot of rehabilitation principles that you can play with. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I loved about making this as a remote course was my patients don't always have yoga props at their house. And I don't expect people who participate in this course to have yoga props in their house. It's like a scavenger hunt around the home of like, well, what can you use instead of a block or a blanket? Because this is exactly what your patient is going to be needing to do.
Mm.
Because we don't want to require a lot of like purchases in order to rest. That's sort of antithetical to being able to rest in your home, is having to go buy a bunch of stuff, right? And so I feel like the practice of saying, oh, how am I going to take this course in my home and like gather the things that I have, translates directly to how you would teach a patient to do these things and to make time in your home for yourself, which I think can be difficult.
Mhm. Well, and I'm sure some of the participants love to learn the work for themselves, right? You
Yes.
get to apply that.
Yeah, as much as this is for patients, and it absolutely is great for patients, I use it all the time with my patients. It's also a personal practice for me to prevent things like burnout and to prevent like overworking, and to really just take a moment to say, okay, I'm gonna pull my clinician self back into my personal self, and I'm gonna lay on the floor and just rest for a second.
Mhm.
And we know as humans, we have to take care of ourselves first in order to be really available and connected to our patients. And so this is a really quick trick for clinicians to be able to take care of themselves a little bit better.
Mhm. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts about the course. And I know it's being offered a few times this year at least.
Yes, I think three.
Wonderful. And so folks can find all that information on the website. And thanks again, Kate.
Great. Thanks, Ollie.